Alright guys, so today we are going to create a mapper using generic interfaces. Let's get started. So let's define the generic interface first. Let's call it a mapper. We need to pass some type parameters to make it generic. Let's say we use source, and then let's call the other one as output. Right, that's the simple interface. Right, so now we have the mapper. So what we do is we need to add a method. Let's call it map. And what this map does is simply taking our t source and then return the t output, right? So that is the simple mapper we are going to create. Let's call this as source. So that's pretty much it, guys. So we have the generic interface based mapper defined. Let's get some data in place. So first let's create an interface called API response. So we assume this is kind of like a third-party API response. Let's take a really common example. Let's say we are fetching some posts. So let's give it an ID. And then title. Let's say this one, content. All right, so we got a really simple API response in place. Right, guys, so now we got the mapper defined, the generic mapper interface, we got the API response. Now what we need is another interface that actually the platform level data structure, right? So where we take this third party response and map into the our platform level. We don't want to keep the API response as it is, because we need to keep our platform as much as neutral with the third party APIs we are using. So for as a start, we might just get the same details as what we have here. So we'll just copy them as it is. We can make it more meaningful later. So we get the post ready, we got the API response, that's all good. So now what we need to do is, let's try to create a mapper, some concrete mapper, just to kind of mapping out the source into the output, in our case API response into the post, right? So for that we need to create a concrete class for that. Okay, so what we have to do is, now let's create a class. Let's say class, and let's call it post mapper, right? And that will actually implement our mapper, which is a generic interface based mapper. So we need to let the mapper know, because since this is a generic one, we need to tell it the source type and the output types. In our case, it would be API response, and the output would be our platform data structure post. So you can see it's complaining, which is about we need to implement this particular method, right? So let's copy it over here. It's map, but this time it's taking the API response as the source, and the output would be post. And now what we have to do is we have to kind of do the mapping inside here and return a post. So that's the next step we need to do. Right, guys, so now let's start do the mapping. It's very simple. As of now, we are just going to return, take the ID, we get the ID from the source, right? And we have the title, and we get it from the source title, and then the content. So as of now, it's all matching the same field names as in the API response, but let's keep it very simple to start with. And now it's all good. So we have this map method, which returns the exactly thing what we need to convert the API response into the post, right? So let's try to use it. what we can do is let's create an instance of the post mapper. Let's call it post mapper. And let's new post mapper here. And to use this, the next step we would have to define some sort of API response object. And then we'll see what kind of post it will return when we use this post mapper. Right, so first let's define an API response structure of this interface. So we'll say response, and let's mark it as type as API response. That would be easy for us to structure in things. And so we'll just allow what are the values we need to give an ID. Some sort of ID here, and the title, say title, and then what we need is the content. Let's call this one content. Right, so here it's complaining because of course it should be a number. Right, so all good. So we got the API response. Now what we have to do is we'll just console log the output. So what we can do is we take the post mapper, call the map object, and we are passing the API response, right? So let's get another line here just to make it a bit more clearer. We'll say it as mapped or something like that, so we can see the response after running this code here. Okay guys, so let's run this example and then we can do a recap. But if we do a quick recap now, we define the generic interface, some data structures here, and we create a concrete class which implements the mapper. And now we create a mapper object here. We got the API response. Now we are trying to see what is the output of doing this map, right? So let's get the console logs open and let's run this. So you can see, as we expected from its API response, it's been mapped to the same values, because at the moment our API response and the post look same. But you get the idea. We use the mapper, it take the source and is constructing an object of post and give us the output, right? And now what we can do is we can kind of make a different from the API response to post. Then we will see the real value of this example. So for example, if we define something called, let's say, metadata, right? And in that metadata we have some sort of some metadata values. Let's say common one is feature, right? So we'll say some sort of a boolean here. Okay, and in our post we don't need to have something called metadata. What we need is a boolean called is featured, because we might change the API and then we don't know how that would send, right? It could be through metadata, it could be directly in the response, we don't know. So so what we want to do is inside our platform we want to keep our data structure quite simple. So now we can see API response and the post quite different data structure, so we definitely need to have mapper. So that is the whole idea. So let's go and modify. So we get the source here, but now we have to do some proper mapping because we have this featured in our platform. Now from this source, slightly different, we have to go to the metadata and get this one. Here we go. And the response, of course, we need to change here as well. Let's put metadata, and we'll say feature, right? So let's say, yeah, this post is featured. Okay. And let's run the example again. Now you can see we have the ID, title, content, and is feature set to true. Now guys, this is the whole idea of using the mapper. So we have different structure in the API response, which come from third party, but in the platform, we have a different structure of data. So now what we do is we use the mapper to map it and take the correct data structure into our platform. Alright guys, let's do a final recap. So objective was we want to create a mapper using the generic interfaces. So we create a mapper interface here, passing in two type parameters, tSource and toutput. One simple method, take the tSource and we do toutput here. And then we had created a couple of data structures. One is for third-party API response, and then we had the post, a class implementing our mapper, and then we create an instance of that. We tried out the output of the map method or function here. Now the whole idea of we are using generic interfaces, guys, we don't have to create a mapper every time, because it's kind of like even though the source and output can be vary, still the map is the same method, right? Same kind of idea. We get a source and we do the output. So for example, if we want to change something else, let's change this into a different, let's call this API response 2, and this one something else, not a post, let's say a message or something, right? And this one we'll call the API response message API. And here we only have, let's say, ID and message here, and this one is string, right? And this is our internal structure. And here we'll say we have the ID and we have the message here, right? And to do this mapping, we can't use the post mapper because it's different. As you can see, we pass the two parameters, API response and post. Then we have to create a new mapper. So in this case, we'll call it message mapper. And of course, it will take the API response message API, and this will be message. And then we have to, of course, change the source and the return type here, because now this mapper is being parameterized to use this message API and this message data structure. So this will be changed as well. Message, and we got it from the source to message. Right, guys? So if you want to have another kind of a mapper, this time it would be const, make it short, message mapper, and that it will be the new message mapper. Right, guys? Didn't change anything in the mapper. This is generic. It's just kind of we pass in the type parameters to make it more concrete. And now we have the post mapper using implement the same mapper interface, but passing the right parameters into that. And we have the second mapper is a message mapper, and we are passing the right parameters into that interface. So that's pretty much it, guys. So we kind of can create precise mappers just using generic interfaces, right? And that's the whole idea. We don't have to repeat the same code again and again. We'll keep it nice and simple. And then we parameterize that whenever we need it based on the data structure that we are going to pass. Right. So guys, I think that's pretty much for this example. And yeah, we'll meet again in another video with another useful TypeScript example. Thank you, guys.